In this next video on mobile SEO ranking factors, we're going to talk about tools. Now, there's so many moving parts to mobile SEO that tools are absolutely imperative. We're going to talk about 3 pretty simple tools but powerful tools, and you might find that you need more tools after you understand these ones. So, the basic tools we're going to talk about for mobile SEO are the Page Speed Insights tool from Google, another Google tool called the Mobile Friendly Test tool, and then the third piece we're going to talk about is inside of the Search Console, and it's called the Mobile Usability Chart. So let's get right into why tools are required. There's so many possible problems with mobile. There's so many things that can go wrong on a daily and a weekly basis that without tools, a human being would never be able to assess what they need to work on and really track their performance. And so it's really the only way that you can ensure that you're going to be ready. You need to have a process for testing and to test often. And one of the concerns about mobile is when you do test, a lot of the things you're going to find that are wrong are going to require a developer. And so you need to have a developer resource, either somebody you outsource or contract or somebody you've got full time. It really depends on how big your site is and how often you would need somebody. But a lot of the mobile SEO problems can't be fixed by a marketer. It's going to require somebody with a little bit of coding ability, and some get pretty advanced. And so we're going to discuss them. I want to make sure that you know what they all are. Even if you don't know how to fix them, you should at least be able to discuss them, assess them, talk about them, report to the developer, and make sure they get done correctly. So first tool we're going to talk about is the Page Speed Insights tool. Speed is a huge factor with mobile. I would say it's probably the most important factor with mobile. And you might have heard me say with desktop and regular websites on the regular, the traditional search engine, search results, I've said links are very, very important. And links and all the other ranking factors still play a part. But I feel, based on projects that I've looked at, I feel like Google's put a lot of emphasis on speed. And so it's very important that you understand the Page Speed Insights tool and you fix your website as best as you can. Some of the factors that are going to need attention are going to be listed individually, and there's going to be links that explain what they are and why. And so I'll show you some screenshots of how this works, but most of what you're going to see is going to be related to compression and the number of requests that your site has. And so what I mean by that is when you're loading a web page into a browser, you're literally contacting a server remotely and asking it to download into your browser. Well, if the pieces that you're downloading are very large, it could take a long time to download those. And so it's important that we have everything compressed as well as we can, designed to transfer quickly and evenly over the bandwidth that we have available. And then the second part is if we have a lot of different assets, say images, for example. Let's say we've got 20 images on a web page, but those images are hosted on different servers. Just the number of times we have to go to the internet, find the server, and do a request to download that image and then download the image, that could take, it could take a long time. And even if it was just milliseconds, doing it 20 times is going to add up to, a second or maybe 2 seconds. Well, a couple of seconds in mobile browsing is a lifetime. And so it's important that we have figured out how to get all of our images and content as quickly as we can, make sure they're compressed and very streamlined. So the Page Speed Insights tool will let us know how well we're doing. So I grabbed a website. It's just a random website that I know about. It's a property management company. They're called wolfnest.com. And I just popped their URL into this Insights tool. And what it says is they are a 42 out of 100. Now, that looks like a pretty bad score, especially when there's red, yellow, and green. I want to first say that the score that you get, you don't need to be 100 to rank at the top of the search engine. It's really relative to how good the rest of your industry is. So when you check your page speed, it'd be important to check all of your competitors as well. Just go through and run all of theirs and get an idea of what is my field of competition. If everybody's an 8, and you're a 42, you're probably doing pretty well. But if everybody's a 50 and you're a 42, that's not going to be great. And so this particular site actually ranks very high for a lot of terms nationally, even though they're only a 42. And so I want to use them as an example so you could see that even with a little slower speed, it's still possible. But the reason why it's possible is their competitors are very bad. Most of them are below 10 when you run the report. Now, the factors that it looks at are going to be based on something called a Core Web Vitals assessment. I don't really have the time to go too deep into Core Web Vitals, but if you run a page speed test, the link will be right there on the page and you can click in and kind of read what it is. Now, when you scroll down, you'll notice it says first contentful paint, and then largest contentful paint. So it's looking at how quickly we're delivering content to the page and then how quickly the largest content is getting delivered to the page. It's also looking at delay, and it's looking at the cumulative layout shift. Now, we want to be as good as we can in all of these areas. Some of it might not make sense, and so like I said, there's little flags you can click on and read about these and learn about them. And this is probably somewhere where you're going to want to go in, run an experiment, click in, and start reading everything that you can. And so don't be surprised if the first time you test your website, if it's very, very low. Anyway, so it gives you a bunch of information. And then if you scroll down farther down this page, it actually screenshots every few milliseconds where you're at. And so it'll screenshot when you first start loading the page, and you can see the progress. So on this particular page, as we loaded, you'll notice that the first couple are completely blank, and then the content starts to fill in. Now, it gives us some opportunities or some recommendations, and the biggest one that it talks about is to defer off-screen images. So what that means is that there are images that are not even shown on the screen that it loads on, that are taking up to 20 seconds to load. That's a long time. We want our entire page to load completely if we can in a second or less. And so to spend 20 seconds on off-screen images that aren't even going to show just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so again, this stuff requires probably a developer. The second one on here I want to point out, eliminate render blocking resources. So what that means is there are going to be parts of the page that are blocked from showing because we don't want Google to spend their time trying to visualize the page. Now, that's an old technique. Back when they only had one crawler that was a desktop crawler, we didn't really want to show images or anything that would take time to load. We just wanted Google to look at the code and then move on to the next website. And that was a good thing that we could do for ranking, except for now, Google has specifically come out and said, well, we're going to load your page. We want to see that it's mobile friendly. We're checking everything. And so we need to make sure that we don't block anything from rendering. And so every resource needs to be able to render just like we would have it render for a person. And we'll talk a little bit more in future videos about this. Anyway, so there's some unused JavaScript, some unused CSS, and so it's just a little bit of house cleaning we need to do. Anyway, it gives us recommendations about what we can do to improve the page speed. The next tool is the mobile friendly test tool. Now this is a much more simple tool. It crawls the URL and just tells you, does it fit inside the screen? Is the text big enough? And is it mobile friendly? And so it's going to show a view of how Google actually sees your web page. Now, it's not overly technical. It's actually pretty easy to understand, and it's not going to give you a bunch of advice like the last tool does. There's a few little tidbits, but it's mostly just kind of a pass-fail situation. And so it goes through and checks one URI at a time, meaning one resource on the page. You probably heard the term URL. Obviously, that's a website, but a URI makes up a URL. So a series of URIs will come together to make a URL. And so URIs might be JavaScript files, they might be individual images or individual pieces of content. And it goes through and checks each one of them to make sure that they're mobile friendly. And so it only looks at mobile, and it does not do a test of desktop, where that previous tool, the PageSpeed Insights tool, will test mobile speed and desktop speed both. Let's take a look at the tool. So in this one, I actually used my agency FireToss, very brave to use my own website. So I put my website in there, and it says this page is mobile friendly. Now, I mentioned that it's kind of a pass-fail. There's a third option. Sometimes you'll put a website in there and it'll say, sorry, we can't even look at this website because there's something blocking us from seeing it. So there's something you can put on a server called a robots.txt file, and you may have heard me mention it in other videos. But the robots.txt file is actually what tells a search engine what to crawl and what not to crawl. And sometimes if you're blocking the entire site inadvertently, this tool will tell you, hey, you've got a robots.txt file that's not allowing us to even crawl your site. So you need to remove that before we can tell you if it's mobile friendly or not. And that's a really big deal. If you're not allowing Google or Bing or any of the other search engines to crawl your website, well, guess what? You're not going to rank on those search engines. And so you never want to block your entire website. And it does happen quite a bit. We see it all the time. And so you want to be careful about that. Anyway, so this one is mobile friendly, and there's just a little bit of stuff you can learn on this if you want to look at it a little deeper. If you scroll down a little farther on that page, it'll show you an entire screenshot of what the website is going to look like. And you can see that Google indeed does load your web page the same way that a user loads your web page. So that's important to remember. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is the mobile usability chart inside of the Google Search Console. So if you log into your Webmaster Tools Search Console and you look on the side under search traffic, you'll find an area called mobile usability. And if you go into that chart, it's going to tell you if there's any errors or any problems. And so we'll look at that in just a second. But in order to see this, on this one, you need to set up a Google Webmaster Tools Search Console account. And so if you haven't set that up before, then you're not going to be able to see anything. The first two tools work independently, but this one requires some setup. And so if you haven't done it, it's very simple. You literally just go to Search Console. You can just do a search for it, find the login. You log in with a Gmail address. It asks you what your website is. You tell it, and then it will ask you to verify. And once you've verified, you'll start being able to receive data on how your website is performing. Now, it's going to show a history of errors on mobile devices on this mobile usability chart. And so the chart is really a chart of how many errors you have, meaning things that don't conform to the mobile SEO factors. The line should always be declining. Your errors should be going down or be zero. Or if you do have a few errors, you want to see a straight line or a decline. You never want to see it going up. So the main thing that I concern about with this mobile usability chart is I want to make sure that I don't see a spike in mobile usability errors. That will be a signal to Google that something's going on with your site, and you'll start to lose your rankings pretty sharply. If it increases, you're going to have a serious problem long term. So on this particular site, this is a tourism website called sevenslopes.com. Again, I'm just picking random sites on some of these examples. This one says that there are 2 errors and there's 3 total issues that have been found. And you can see that it's got a date on when it finds each one. And so this went from 1 error to 2 errors. Now, if we scroll down the page, we can see what these errors are. One of the errors is that the text is too small to read. The other one was that the clickable elements on the page are too close together. And then another one says that some of the content is wider than the screen. Well, if you've got those fixed, if you see that and you've gone in and had your developer, or maybe you have the skills to fix that, if you fix those, you can actually click on those and notify Google that you fixed them, and they'll go back and they'll recrawl. And so we want to take care of those errors as they arise. I want to keep this chart really clean and not have a lot of things that I have to worry about. So some of those errors that it showed are going to be discussed in our next video on viewports. And so viewports will discuss kind of the beginnings of responsive design, and we'll actually show you some of the code behind how you build a responsive design website. It's a little bit technical, but I feel like it's very necessary in order to properly understand mobile SEO. I'll see you in the next video.